Hey folks, Wally DM here, and today we're going to take a look at the tripwire that isn't trap. Now this is a fun corridor trap that you could run for your players. Now if you'd like to see the written version of this trap, you can find it in Grimtooth's Traps 2 or in Grimtooth's Ultimate Collection. But I do have good news for you if you don't have either one of those books, and that is Goodman Games is doing a Kickstarter for Grimtooth's Traps. They're going to take over 150 of the classic traps and convert them or reincarnate them for 5th edition and Dungeon Crawl Classics. This is a project I'm super excited about. I am a huge fan of Grimtooth's Traps. It falls into my top 5 trap books of all time, and I'm excited to see these old school traps brought into modern day. If you'd like to check out the Kickstarter, it's live now. I'll put a link in the description below. Now let's get started with the tripwire that isn't. So in this trap, our adventuring party is traveling down a corridor, and they're going to automatically detect a tripwire that's about 18 inches off the ground. Now the main feature of this corridor trap is a standard hinged section of the floor, balanced upon a central fulcrum. Now the floor will give way to the slightest weight, and the flipping floor section will let down into a pit down below. So our trap itself isn't actually triggered by tripping over this wire, but it's triggered by a character landing on one side of it, which is going to put a lot of weight onto the floor, and the hinge section is going to cause it to flip, and whichever character is standing on that is going to fall into the trap below. Now once this hinge floor begins to rotate, it's not going to stop. It's going to continue to spin.
The tripwire that isn't a trap. Now isn't that a conundrum? You see, when you're walking down a corridor, delving in somebody's dungeon, you see a tripwire, what you gonna do? You wanna step over that, but not in this one, because stepping over it makes the floor pivot, start spinning, and you're trapped in there spinning forever, for all eternity as far as I care.
Now as far as the distance of this trap is concerned, the area of rotating floor is 10 feet across, but I'm going to add an extra 1 foot that will signify the hinge section in the middle that this rotating floor is rested on. I would also allow an extra 2 feet in order for them to jump without tripping the tripwire. So all in all, I'm going to make this a 13-foot section, so any character with a strength of 13 or more is going to be able to jump across safely. So let's say our sorcerer is next. They get a running start, they jump, but they only have a strength of 8. They're going to land on this section of floor. It's going to activate the trap, and they're going to fall into the pit down below. And once again, once this hinge section of floor starts to spin, it could spin for hours or even days. Now, rather than jumping, let's say one of our characters wants to be more cautious and just wants to step over the tripwire. Now that is still going to trigger the trap, but since they are being careful, we can allow them a DC 13 dexterity saving throw in order to step back before falling into the trap. But of course, if they fail that saving throw, the floor is going to spin and they're going to fall in the trap below. Now, any character that does fall into the pit is going to take 14 points of bludgeoning damage, but of course you can adjust that to make this a little bit more deadly or a little bit easier. That's totally up to you as the game master. So now that we've seen this trap in action, let's take a closer look on how it works and a little bit of the engineering that went into it. Now the pivoting section of the floor has an axle that allows the floor to spin, and that axle in the pivoting floor is covered with an excessive amount of oil of slipperiness. So once it's triggered, that floor section is going to spin for hours and even days, unless the characters interject and try to stop it. And as we have already discussed, they have to be careful, otherwise they're going to be making a strength saving throw and lose either the object that they're trying to stop it with or themselves. They're going to fall into the trap.
With this engineering marvel, to keep it going, I use a potion of slipperiness. Now, here's a tip for all you home trap enthusiasts. You don't want to buy this from no scroll-sniffing wizard merchant, do you? No, sir. You want to get it straight from the source, and you gotta squeeze them ferrets. You gotta squeeze them so hard. You're gonna get enough of this to make a whole floor that's gonna pivot, alright? So that's tip 101 from Grimtooth the Troll here, and you're welcome.
However, one of the most ironic parts of this entire trap is if the characters break this tripwire, 2 spring-loaded steel spikes are going to fire up into the floor, and it's going to hold this trap in place. So once the tripwire is broken, our characters can walk across with no issue whatsoever. Now, one of the other things the characters can do is if they've seen that unnatural crack and are able to determine that this is a shifting or a pivoting floor, then they can make a DC 15 dexterity check with Thieves' Tools to allow them to secure that floor section in place. And again, once that happens, they'll be able to walk through with no problem. Now, one of the ways that you could adjust or change the threat of this trap is that you could have the hinge section quickly return to a level position and lock back in place. So rather than that oil of slipperiness continually moving this floor section around and around, that's going to lock back in place, trapping whoever fell in the trap below, and then the character is going to need to find a way to get them out. Now, the trap or floor section itself is going to have an armor class of 19 and 40 hit points, but it can be broke open with a successful DC 18 strength check. And then finally, we have our pit below. Again, as a game master, you can determine what type of damage or what is down in this pit. There could be iron spikes that'll make it a little bit more deadly, or maybe even some type of a cage that traps the characters inside. And of course, we could also have monsters down there. They're going to fall down, and then whoever is down in that trap is going to have to take the monsters on by themselves. So that's all I have for you today. What did you think of the trap? Is this something that you would put in your game? And if so, what would you do differently? And don't forget, if you'd like to get the Grimtooth Old School Traps for 5th edition or Dungeon Crawl Classics, that Kickstarter is live now. I'll put a link in the description below. Thank you very much for watching, and on to the next.